I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen bee.
The marriage did not begin to collapse with a public argument, a scandalous photograph, or a whispered confession. It began with a sealed envelope placed on King Charles's desk during a quiet evening at Clarence House. Inside was proof that Queen Camilla had secretly negotiated with Prince Harry behind her husband's back, and the promise she had made threatened not only their marriage, but Charles's authority over the entire royal family. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles sat alone after dinner when his private secretary entered carrying a correspondence file. The official placed it before the king and waited. Clarence House, the monarch's London residence, had always felt like a refuge from the machinery of the crown. That evening, it became the place where trust began to die. The file had surfaced during an internal review of messages exchanged with Harry's representatives, and one signed note carried Camilla's unmistakable wording. The king opened it once, then again. Camilla had offered Harry a private route back into selected royal events, access to family briefings, and her personal support in future negotiations, all without Charles's knowledge or approval. A royal briefing meant restricted information prepared for senior family members, making the promise more serious than a family favor. He removed his glasses and set them beside the page. Across the desk, the secretary watched the color drain from his face. Charles felt anger, but humiliation cut deeper. Camilla had repeatedly assured him that she supported his firm position toward his younger son. Now the same phrases she had used to promise complete loyalty appeared inside a documented exchange with Harry's intermediary. The correspondence showed several messages spread across weeks. This had not been a sudden act of compassion. It had been planned and protected. One sentence struck hardest. Camilla had promised she could soften the king's position from within. The words turned their marriage into leverage, and his private affection into a bargaining tool. Charles closed the folder as footsteps sounded in the adjoining corridor. The Queen appeared near the doorway, paused, and sensed the distance in his expression. He could not look at her. She did not ask what he had discovered. The king waited until she moved away, then ordered his secretary to trace the first contact, identify every intermediary, and determine whether anyone else in the family had known. But to understand why Camilla risked the marriage she had fought decades to secure, Charles first had to confront the three people trapped at the center of the betrayal, and the very different fears driving each of them. To Charles, the secret agreement was an act of marital betrayal. To Harry, it was a possible road back toward the family he had lost. But to Camilla, the deal represented something more complicated. An attempt to control a crisis she believed the king could no longer contain. Each entered the arrangement carrying a different wound, and by the time their motives collided, affection had become strategy, and trust had become a weapon. Charles had spent years believing that his marriage was the one place where the pressures of the crown could not reach him. The crown meant the duties, authority, and public burden carried by the monarch, and those demands had followed him through every controversy surrounding his relationship with Camilla. After everything they had endured, he believed she understood him better than anyone. That was why the secret contact with Harry cut so deeply. It was not simply a disagreement over family policy. It suggested that his wife had looked at him and decided he could no longer be trusted to manage his own son. Harry carried a different kind of desperation. Isolated from the working monarchy, the small group of royals who perform official duties on behalf of the king, he had become increasingly unsure whether any path back to his father still existed. Then the call came. Sitting alone in his California study, he heard an intermediary explain that Camilla was willing to open a private channel. He stood immediately and asked for the offer to be repeated. The Duke distrusted her because of their painful history, yet the possibility of returning to selected family events was powerful enough to silence that suspicion. Camilla felt the danger from the beginning. After her first indirect exchange with Harry, she sat beside a cold fireplace and told herself she was preventing another public rupture. The Queen believed Charles had become trapped by pride, and she convinced herself that only she could move between father and son, without forcing either man to surrender first. Yet beneath that justification was something more personal. She wanted to prove that she possessed the influence to solve a crisis the king had failed to contain. The conditions revealed the true shape of the bargain. Harry would reduce public attacks, avoid repeating private royal conversations, and allow Camilla to present the reconciliation as her achievement. Her messages never confirmed whether William had been consulted, raising the possibility that she intended to bypass both the reigning monarch and the future king. Charles understood what that meant. His wife had not merely tried to help. She had built a private structure of power around his weakness. The palace review soon uncovered the precise moment that pushed her into making contact. It had happened at a royal gathering, where one sentence from Charles left Camilla humiliated, angry, and determined to act alone. That exchange had taken place weeks earlier, beneath the politeness of a family occasion, and those who witnessed its aftermath would later recognize it as the moment Camilla crossed a line she could never uncross. Every betrayal has a moment before it, a final warning that seems insignificant until everything collapses. For Camilla, that moment came during a private family dinner at Windsor Castle. The conversation was meant to concern an upcoming royal commemoration. Charles entered the small dining room already prepared for resistance. Camilla sat across from him, while William remained close enough to hear every word, joined by several senior household figures responsible for organizing the forthcoming commemoration. A royal commemoration is an official event honoring an important person or moment in the monarchy's history, and every invitation carried both emotional and public meaning. Harry's possible attendance had therefore become more than a family question. It was a test of whether he could re-enter royal life without accepting the duties and limits that came with it. The king ended the argument with brutal clarity. Harry would not attend, receive advance family briefings, or use Camilla as an intermediary unless he approached his father directly and accepted strict conditions. The Queen quietly placed down her fork and asked whether refusing every indirect channel might deepen the separation. Charles did not hesitate. "This is my son, and it will be handled my way." Camilla felt the words land like a public dismissal. Charles had rejected her concern in front of William and the household officials, and what began as fear for the family quickly mixed with wounded pride. She believed the monarch was allowing pain to harden into policy. Worse, she believed she could succeed where he had failed. The future king noticed her expression change. She said little after that, but her silence carried more danger than an argument. William followed his father into the corridor once dinner ended. The prince chose his words carefully, warning that Camilla had not appeared to accept the decision. Charles dismissed the concern, convinced that his wife might be frustrated, but would never act against him. That confidence would soon become the cruelest part of the betrayal. Camilla moved before the night was over. She asked a trusted aide whether an unofficial message could reach Harry without entering palace records. The aide refused at first, explaining that hidden contact could be seen as bypassing the king. She insisted it was not disloyalty but preventive diplomacy, a private effort to stop another public family explosion. The Queen returned to her room and began drafting the message herself. She deleted it twice, softened the conditions, then finally wrote the sentence that would condemn her. She could influence Charles from within. When the king later reconstructed that night, he understood the deal had not been born from compassion alone. It had grown from humiliation, pride, and the need to prove him wrong. By the time Camilla entered the king's private sitting room, Charles no longer wanted an explanation from his queen. He wanted the truth from the woman he believed had chosen Harry's confidence over her husband's trust. There were no courtiers in the room, no secretaries taking notes, and no polished statement prepared to soften what came next. Charles stood beside a table, holding the correspondence that had exposed everything. Camilla entered expecting a difficult conversation, but the moment she saw her own signed note lying open beneath his hand, she understood that denial was impossible. Their marriage was about to face the one accusation neither could survive unchanged. Charles had deliberately cleared the room because this was not merely a dispute over family conduct. It was a constitutional breach, a violation involving the authority and responsibilities of the sovereign, and an intimate betrayal between husband and wife. Camilla knew her communications might have been discovered, yet she still believed she could explain them as an attempt to protect him from another public crisis involving Harry. Then the king pushed the document across the table. "Did you promise my son that you could change me from inside this marriage?" Camilla reached for the back of a chair but did not sit. Charles remained standing, denying them both the familiar comfort of an ordinary private conversation. She admitted authorizing the contact, then argued that his refusal to compromise had driven Harry further away and increased the risk of another damaging public attack. The Queen insisted she had tried to create a controlled route toward peace before bitterness became permanent. The king heard the explanation, but his fury slowly gave way to something far more painful. He asked why she had not trusted him enough to challenge him openly. His voice dropped, and the quiet accusation cut deeper than anger. Charles had defended their marriage through decades of judgment. Now the woman he had trusted most had secretly treated that bond as a way to influence him. Camilla's restraint finally broke. She told him that he listened only when agreement came disguised as obedience. The words exposed resentment that had existed long before Harry's messages began. She had spent years supporting Charles publicly, yet privately, she felt increasingly dismissed whenever her judgment conflicted with his own. But the monarch refused to let old wounds excuse deception. Charles asked what Harry had offered in return. Camilla hesitated. That pause revealed the negotiations had gone further than she first admitted. She finally confirmed that the Duke had tentatively agreed to remain publicly silent about certain family matters, avoid repeating private conversations, and accept a controlled ceremonial appearance if she could secure access. The king's decision came without hesitation. Camilla would lose access to every discussion concerning Harry, and she would surrender all remaining correspondence before leaving the room. She closed the door softly behind her, but Charles immediately summoned William. The confrontation had broken the private bond between king and queen, yet the next decision would reveal something even more dangerous. Camilla's influence existed only as long as Charles and William allowed it to exist. Camilla had spent years building influence through proximity, patience, and the confidence of the king. But royal power is never secured by affection alone. When William entered his father's study and read the agreement for himself, the crisis changed shape. It was no longer simply about a wife deceiving her husband. It became a struggle over who had the right to negotiate the monarchy's future, and whether Camilla had mistaken access for authority. Charles controlled the present royal household, but William carried enormous influence over what would survive into the next reign. As heir, the prince stood first in line to become monarch, giving his judgment special weight whenever family conflict threatened the crown's future. His own relationship with Harry remained deeply wounded. Any hidden route around agreed boundaries, therefore, felt like more than disobedience. To him, it threatened the discipline holding the family together. William took the note and read every line in silence. He folded it carefully along its existing crease, then looked at his father. "What exactly did she promise in your name?" The king struggled to answer. Speaking the words aloud would turn private humiliation into an official admission. For one painful moment, the future king did not see a sovereign protecting his authority. He saw a husband trying to understand why the woman beside him had used their marriage as leverage. William felt fury toward Camilla, but he refused to exploit the fracture. He kept his voice measured because anger might force Charles to defend her out of instinct. Instead, the prince focused on control. Every future communication involving Harry would pass through the king's private secretary, the senior official who manages the monarch's confidential work, and nothing would move forward without written approval from Charles. The danger, however, extended beyond messages. William asked whether Camilla had used royal staff, official vehicles, secure telephone lines, or restricted briefing material to strengthen her promise. Charles authorized an immediate review. Hours later, a household log produced the most troubling discovery yet. Someone connected to the Queen's office had accessed a confidential family schedule shortly before Harry's intermediary received a message. Restricted information may have been offered as proof that she could deliver access. Charles recoiled when William suggested removing Camilla from every household meeting. The king refused. His anger was severe, but affection still fought against punishment. He would contain her influence, not publicly destroy her. That hesitation told the prince that the marriage remained alive, even if trust had been badly wounded. Camilla waited outside as William emerged carrying the folder beneath his arm. He paused, gave her a restrained nod, and walked past without a word. Within hours, staff responsibilities shifted, invitations changed, and familiar channels began closing around her. No announcement had yet been made, but as doors closed and familiar briefings stopped arriving, Camilla realized that Charles had begun punishing the betrayal in the one language the palace understood perfectly: access. Royal punishment rarely begins with a dramatic declaration. It begins with absences, a red box that does not arrive, a meeting quietly removed from a diary, an aide who suddenly needs written permission to speak. By the morning after the confrontation, Camilla remained queen in title, yet the machinery around her had shifted. For the first time since becoming Charles's wife, she felt the palace treating her not as a partner, but as a risk. Camilla entered her morning office expecting the usual confidential folder at the center of her desk. It was gone. The folder normally contained private schedules, family updates, and restricted advice prepared for senior royals, making its absence impossible to dismiss as an oversight. Her private secretary struggled through an explanation. She had been removed from every family reconciliation discussion involving Harry, denied access to his communications, and excluded from a senior strategy meeting. The palace would announce nothing because Charles feared a visible marital rupture would consume every royal duty, yet the silence made the punishment feel colder. The Queen dismissed the staff and sat alone. She stared at the empty space where the folder should have been, first shocked, then quietly humiliated. Charles had reduced their marriage to a security calculation. That thought wounded her, but she could not deny why he had done it. Her secrecy had turned affection into risk, and now the king was protecting the institution from the woman he once trusted to protect him. Camilla removed her reading glasses when told that William would attend an engagement planning meeting in her place. An engagement was an official public duty carried out on behalf of the monarchy, and losing influence over those plans signaled that her authority was shrinking. "So this is how he wants me to understand it," she said. The prince would now stand where she had expected to sit, and Charles had chosen exclusion instead of another argument. A new message deepened the trap. Harry's intermediary urgently asked whether their agreement still stood. If Camilla responded, she would betray her husband again. If she remained silent, Harry might believe he had been manipulated and expose everything. Before she could decide, another blow arrived. Her secretary confirmed through the internal review that one member of her own staff had supplied the correspondence after becoming alarmed by her promise to influence Charles. The Queen confronted the aide privately. She demanded to know why years of service had ended in betrayal, but the answer silenced her. Loyalty to the crown outranked loyalty to any individual royal. Camilla could not dismiss the aide because those words echoed the king's accusation too closely. Charles moved into a separate suite that night, officially because of an early engagement. Neither believed the excuse. Then, at her lowest point, Camilla received an unexpected request for a private meeting from Harry himself, without aides, lawyers, or intermediaries. The secret deal had cost Camilla her husband's confidence, but the private conversation Harry now demanded would force her to decide whether to protect the agreement or finally admit that she had promised him power she never possessed. The arrangement had begun through cautious messages and carefully chosen intermediaries, but it ended with two people sitting opposite each other without protection. Harry wanted to know whether Camilla had ever possessed the influence she offered him. Camilla wanted to know whether he had viewed her as a peacemaker or merely as a root around his father. Their private conversation stripped away strategy, leaving only regret, anger, and an unavoidable choice. Harry arrived at the discreet residence during his brief visit to Britain with no palace officials beside him. Camilla had also come alone, knowing that another hidden negotiation could destroy whatever remained of her marriage. An intermediary is a person who carries messages between people unwilling or unable to speak directly, but none stood between them now. The Duke feared he had been used in an internal struggle for power. The Queen feared he had accepted her help only because she offered a path around Charles. Harry placed a printed copy of her message on the table. He kept his hand over it, as though the page itself demanded an answer. "Could you actually deliver any of this, or did you simply need me to believe you could?" Camilla felt the accusation strike because it echoed the king's question almost exactly. She admitted that she had overestimated her influence and badly underestimated what secrecy would do to her husband. The Duke's restraint began to crack. He told her the offer had reopened hopes of seeing his family without walking into another moment of public humiliation. For a brief time, Harry had believed selected events and private briefings might rebuild something that years of bitterness had destroyed. Now he accused Camilla of turning his estrangement into proof of her own importance. She had offered him hope, he said, because she wanted to demonstrate that she could succeed where Charles had failed. Camilla refused to carry the blame alone. She reminded Harry that he accepted the arrangement because it allowed him to avoid approaching his father directly. The Queen had tried to influence the king from within their marriage, while the Duke had tried to reach him without risking rejection. Silence followed. Both finally recognized the same ugly truth. They had attempted to control Charles instead of facing him honestly. Harry then revealed through the printed correspondence he had brought that he retained copies of every message. He warned that he could release them if the palace portrayed him as the only aggressor. Camilla did not threaten him or offer another bargain. She asked him to destroy the private agreement and promised to tell her husband everything, even if the confession ended her place beside him. The Duke tore the unsigned draft conditions in half, but he kept Camilla's original note. Trust, he said, could not return by pretending the exchange had never existed. She accepted that answer and went back prepared to surrender influence rather than defend another secret. Before she could reach Charles, however, news of the correspondence escaped the palace. Camilla and Harry had finally abandoned the bargain, but the truth they contained in private was already moving beyond them. And by morning, Britain would see the fracture splashed across every front page. At dawn, the crisis stopped belonging to Charles, Camilla, and Harry. It belonged to millions of strangers reading the same devastating headline. The private language of persuasion, loyalty, and marital influence had escaped into public view. What had begun as a concealed attempt to negotiate Harry's return was now being framed as something far larger. A queen operating behind the king's back, and a royal marriage cracking beneath the pressure. Charles understood at once that the leak had changed everything. The public was no longer debating whether Harry should return for selected family occasions. It was asking whether Camilla had undermined her husband's authority from inside their marriage. Palace communications staff, the officials responsible for managing royal statements and press responses, faced three competing dangers: defend the king, avoid publicly destroying the Queen, and prevent the Duke from releasing further correspondence. The front page delivered the first blow. A major newspaper showed Charles and Camilla walking in opposite directions beneath the headline, "The Queen's Secret Promise to Harry." Outside Buckingham Palace, a live broadcaster called it a family reconciliation plan that became a crisis of royal trust. The palace is the monarch's official London headquarters, and by sunrise its gates had become the center of a national spectacle. Crowds gathered as camera crews lined the pavement. One woman held yesterday's newspaper image of the royal couple smiling together beside the new headline exposing their division. That single contrast captured the mood. Public unity one day, private betrayal the next. Commentators began asking whether Camilla would keep her full ceremonial role at future engagements, and whether William had personally approved restrictions on her access. The king watched the coverage without speaking. When an aide offered to turn off the television, Charles refused. Hiding from the story, he said, would not make the document disappear. His anger had become something colder now. Every headline repeated the humiliation he had barely managed to say aloud to his own son. Camilla found the newspaper in her private room and pressed it face down on the table. The Queen finally understood that the public would judge more than one secret decision. People would revisit the entire history of her relationship with Charles and question whether love had ever been separated from influence. Harry's silence made that exposure worse. The Duke issued no immediate comment, giving her neither support nor shared blame. The palace released a concise written statement confirming that internal family communications were under review. It revealed no details, yet its careful wording indirectly confirmed that the crisis was real. With the monarchy demanding a decisive response, Camilla requested one final private meeting with her husband. She was no longer trying to save the agreement. She needed to know whether anything remained of their marriage. The public had delivered its judgment on the scandal, yet only Charles could deliver the verdict that mattered to Camilla. And this time, she entered the room with no argument left, only the truth. Camilla entered the final meeting without documents, advisors, or a defense prepared in advance. Charles had already read every message and heard every justification. Nothing remained to uncover. The only question was whether betrayal had destroyed the marriage completely or merely changed it beyond recognition. What followed was neither a dramatic reconciliation nor a royal expulsion, but a harder verdict. Love could remain, Charles decided, while trust would have to begin again from nothing. Charles had arranged the meeting privately because public speculation was beginning to consume every royal duty. Camilla understood that this was her final chance to accept responsibility, not reshape the story. She admitted establishing the secret channel with Harry, promising influence she did not possess, and treating the king's relationship with his son as a crisis she could control without consent. The Queen placed her personal phone and the remaining correspondence on the table. "There is nothing else," she said. "I will not ask you to believe me before I have earned it." The king felt the weight of those words, but he did not offer quick forgiveness. He told her the deepest wound was not her desire to bring Harry closer. It was her willingness to use their marriage as negotiating currency, something traded to gain influence over another person. Charles had trusted her with his private fears, and she had turned that closeness into proof that she could change him. Camilla did not defend herself. She admitted that pride, frustration, and the need to prove her usefulness had corrupted what began as concern for the family. The Queen had spent decades securing her place beside Charles, only to nearly destroy it by believing proximity gave her the right to speak in his name. Her confession did not erase the betrayal, but it ended the excuses. Charles made his decision. The marriage would continue, but Camilla would never again take part in private negotiations involving Harry, William, or future family settlements. She would retain her public title and ceremonial responsibilities, official duties representing the monarchy, but her influence over sensitive family decisions would be sharply reduced. Harry then sent his father a direct written message without Camilla's involvement. The Duke accepted that any future reconciliation had to happen between father and son, not through secret alliances. His return was not guaranteed. What changed was the path. No more intermediaries, no hidden promises, no shortcuts around rejection. The king opened the door as the meeting ended, but he did not embrace his wife. He paused and told her they would attend their next public engagement together. Privately, however, they would rebuild from the beginning. Their marriage survived in form and feeling, yet the unquestioned partnership she once possessed was over. And so the secret agreement ended not with Harry's triumphant return or Camilla's removal, but with 3 wounded people finally stripped of their shortcuts, leaving Charles and his queen together, changed forever, and under no illusion about the price of trust. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.